Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 4 of Station 11. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up with the situation after the whole David thing, and you have Alex commenting on the fact is that Kirsten keeps sharpening her knives. The fact is that, and we never really see anyone else do that, but I think that's her thing. Like, amongst the troops, she's like the main protector, if not the only protector. But the fact is that, it's like, right, what was David's wife's name? It's like, oh, Rose. And it's like, oh, a Rose by any other name. Or if maybe there was no Rose to begin with. And she's like, I know. But it's like, yeah, you guys lie all the time, and it's because it's like, right, what's so wrong with like reinventing yourself? I mean, you guys lie. You guys do it all the time. It's like, who, actors? It's like, no, pre-pans, which I think is so interesting because I don't know if that's something straight out of the book, that specific terminology, pre-pan, or is that them applying, because to me, I always thought that was the weirdest thing that like people shorthand the pandemic to panty. So I don't know if that them using that exact phrasing like pre-pan is supposed to be like shorthand that's brought about because like people of a younger generation would refer to it as a panty, like at least real life wise, or is that just straight out of the book, which is interesting to think about. But I think that's such an interesting thing that the story does kind of create that narrative of point of like, right, the before and the afters, because I didn't talk about it last time like in episode 2, but it did come up because Alex didn't know how like cell phones and stuff like worked, and because she's pretending on the phone because like there's no place I guess to charge it or whatever, but it's like, oh, she's pretending to use it in episode 2, so it's like, right, this isn't a world she grew up in. She's very much she's sort of the Ellie in this situation to Kirsten kind of being a Joel in this situation, once again making The Last of Us parallel, which is interesting. I mean, I guess, and I've never seen all of The Last of Us 2, so like I'm not going to like comment on it. I've seen like someone play like a little bit of it, but that's about it. But it's just like, yeah, like Ellie in part 2 kind of plays a little bit of both the Ellie character and a little bit of the Joel, so I think it's kind of an interesting thing in this case that we've seen her grow like in 20 years. Well, we spent a little time with her as a little girl, and now we've seen her 20 years later. In this particular instance, I'm referencing Kirsten. But what was really interesting is that, we got a little insight into the Gil situation, because that got brought up in episode 2. Homedude was like, oh, what about the Gil thing? And Dita was like, I can't get into it right now. And we find out the truth about, like, oh yeah, what happened with Gil, because apparently at this, like, the fork in the road where they are currently, basically the musicians would go one place and the actors would go the other place. But the problem is, like, the director was him and Gil. The director was him and Sarah were a thing, and Katrina got in the middle of that, and that complicated things. And now they don't split the troop anymore. And you're like, yeah, apparently Sarah shot him, and it's like, oh my god, Sarah killed Gil. I was like, no, she winged him, but yeah, after that, like, we don't split the troop anymore. We just kind of, So I thought that was interesting. Also, I mean, I guess that also plays into the fact is like, right, we do our wheel circuit and we don't break off of it. I'm wondering, is this one of the main reasons why they don't? Maybe that was always kind of the thing, but even more so now, just because, like, right, we don't go this fork in the road, we stick together and we just go in one path together. So, but Alex ended up finding a pamphlet about David talking about don't believe the prophet's lies and stuff like that. And it's like, right, so he talked about the pre-pans are liars. That those who were born post the pan were able to be, there's something special, because essentially they're not holding all that trauma. And then obviously it strikes a chord with Kirsten, because she's like, right, it sounds just like the Undersea, the children from like Station 11. But she's like, how? Because she's like, I left that book at Gil's. So it's like, that made her go like, did he read it at some point in time? Which maybe there's a possibility here, because like I said, it definitely seemed like that was the feeling I was getting, where it's kind of like, oh, is Station 11 kind of like some cultish Bible now? And it seems like, yes, that it is the core crux of David's theology and stuff like that. It was really interesting. We also actually kind of got finally insight into what Station 11's about. It's about Dr. 11 waking up in space above a broken space station. Essentially, a terrible thing happened. All the adults ended up getting like washed away because there's the commander or captain who's basically locked in his room, who just does nothing but tell stories of the past. And then there's the children who are known as the Undersea because they're the ones that survived while the parents died. And their plan is to try and save everyone through time travel. But I think it's interesting how they paint Dr. 11 as like, right, he talks to everyone and he doesn't choose sides because he doesn't care. I think it's supposed to be like, right, I'm an outsider who woke up in this situation. I'm like, oh, this is the way it is. But this isn't the world I know, so I really don't care. Like, I talk to everyone, but I don't choose a side in this. Because I guess it's like, just like there's the pre-pan and there's the post-pan in this universe, I guess, you know, they didn't really go into it too much, but I guess there's an opposition to the Undersea. I guess the Undersea is like this younger generation, and there's some of the adults who are still alive. You know, it's the conversation of there is no before, you know, and it makes sense because in the parallel of the post-pan kids as well as the Undersea, and I think the parallel is those kids are still being, I think even the post-pans are, I think he's calling them the Undersea, but I think the just general tone, whether it's in the book or whether it's just in the world of in this series, is that the Undersea, it's like, right, for them there is no before because they're not tied to the same trauma everyone else is. Even though Kirsten was a little girl, she remembers what was lost, you know. And I'm about to go all geeky and nerdy again. It's like the Thanos thing of like, right, I have to change the fact is I try to wipe out half the population of the universe for you guys to be grateful to save you, blah, 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 blah. But it didn't ever cross my mind. I need to kill all of you because if I let anyone who remembers how things used to be, there's going to be people who are going to fight for it. So it's kind of a similar thing of like, right, they're not associated with the same trauma because the pre-pans all remember the way the world used to be. How it was, what they lost, whereas everyone born after, it's like, this is the only world they've ever known, you know? It's like, oh, you know? And so I think for, you know, and I think that becomes a big theme of like, right, like, you guys are just stuck perpetually, like, in your own trauma, like, you never change, you keep your routines and stuff like that, you're not as, like, free-spirited, you're not as free-flowing, essentially. Because it's interesting, because Kirsten lied to Sarah, because she was trying to convince Sarah to go see Gil, but it's like, oh, I heard Katrina died. It's like, wait, what? How? Pneumonia. It's like, well, we don't know. But then, like, upon hearing that, Sarah's like, guys, we're splitting the troop. It's like, and one of them was like, really? We're just gonna just change the rules like that? It's like, what's the point in having rules if we're just gonna just casually throw them in the wind like that? So it's like, yeah. They show up to Gil and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, we learned a little bit about the world, about, like, the red bandanas. It's like, oh, they were, like, a militia group of crackheads, apparently, which is interesting. But apparently, like, they ended up, like, killing each other. It seems like, well, what did they call them? It's like, they called them something else. I'm blanking on it now. They called them a different name in, like, I think he said in, like, Virginia or something like that. We called them a different name. But there's still remnants of them, but they're mainly on the East Coast, apparently. But I love that they're rolling up, and it's like, oh, hey, Gil. It's like, wait, is that Katrina? And Dieter's like, oh, I hate Katrina. And obviously Sarah's looking at Kirsten like, you lied to me. She don't look dead to me. But then it's like, oh, stop, the mines are back, and you're like, oh, hey, and it's like, oh boy, this is about to be bad, but it's like, stop, the mine, it's like, wait, what? Yeah, we put the mines back. Why would you do that? It's like, because of everything that happened, David rolled through, and he ended up taking a lot of the children, like the only children that were left, apparently there was only 4, they were like the grandchildren, there was only 4 of them left, and he took them. And Alex running across the field and everyone's losing their mind. Like, stop, what are you doing? Because no one knows. Because it's like, right, they just scattered the mines around. They have no idea where they actually are. Alex ran the path and she ended up running over to him like, hey, I'm sorry, guys. And so Sarah and Gil are having this conversation back and forth. We're like, oh, what comedy are you doing now? And it's like, Hamlet, huh? We said we would never do Hamlet. It's like, yeah, that's when we made decisions together. And he's like, oh, well, what song are you doing? What essentially the music was going to be. And I love that, like, Kirsten's like, okay, Gil, could you literally not be an asshole right now? We almost all just died. because I love to, it's like, okay, so did anyone actually see what path Alex took? And it's like, straight, maybe? I mean, once again, that's straight from her position, but it's like, yeah. But that moment in itself, too, it's like, that she doesn't care in that moment. She ran, like, she has no worries, because that ends up being a point of contention for her, and that ends up being a conversation that Gil has. It's like, right, you guys are terrified to change. You know, you keep things the same. And Sarah came up with this whole lie, like, no, we can reconstruct it, Hamlet. It's not even the same. It's blah, blah, blah. And you have Kirsten being like, what? Because it's like, she's not the lead anymore. Alex is the lead. It's like, oh yeah, we're changing it all completely. And like, oh, Wendy's our writer. And it's like, oh, it's just to show Gil up, you know, just to be like, no, we're fine. We're doing better than ever. Like, oh, you're, you know, Dieter being like, oh, you're a terrible director. He's like, well, you were never a good actor. He's like, I know. I mean, we all know. He's like, yes, I know, but you weren't that great of a director either. So like, they're back and forth. But obviously it's a conversation about like how David like was able to get so close here, because he basically did the same thing of like, oh, pretended to be hurt, crutches and everything, and he showed up with a kid. But then later on, when he showed up again, he showed up with a different kid. So he's like, look, it's a little bit of a Pied Piper type of situation of like children. I guess that's also why Kirsten was asking like how old he actually was, because it's like, yeah, like, is he a pre-pan himself, or I would assume he's a pre-pan. You know, because, like, right, he made up the whole Rose thing, but it's like, maybe it isn't a lie. Maybe it is some truth. I would assume, like, the children wouldn't follow him, like, I was about to say, like, maybe it's supposed to be a thing of, like, I, as a pre-pan, am able to see, like, the hypocrisy behind who we are and what we represent. But you guys are special. You're not tied to this cycle of trauma that we're all caught up in. And, but obviously, like, a lot of the actors are having a hard time connecting with the new material. But Alex is like, no, this is good. But now we get why. Because for her, it's like, we stuck doing the same things over and over again. I mean, hell, even their path is the same. It's been the same for the past, like, 20-ish years. So it's like, of course, like, it's like, right, when you're stuck in the same thing, the routine of it all, it's just like, we're not, you know. But I think it's interesting because they make Kirsten makes the point of like, right, we're artists. We are terrified. Like, I think, you know, putting yourself out there, putting on this performance, like, oh, will it go well? Like, also just opening yourself up. Because even Sarah was like, yeah, back in that play, like, I saw it for a moment, like, in episode 2. It's like, where did you go in that moment? Like, tell me. And then, like, she completely dodges it a little bit. Because I think, you know, what she was thinking about at the time, but also we cut back to that scene and it's her looking at David. So, because he sees something in Kirsten that maybe she doesn't like seeing others. Because, like, even Alex made this reference to, like, right, she's like, it's kind of weird that you always take weapons on stage. And she's like, it's not weird to me. Because she had talked about, like, right, the reason why she was able to see David for what he was as being dangerous, because she was like, right, I was dangerous at one point in time, too. That's why I could see through him to some extent. But, I did like the back and forth that they kind of created in this episode. Like, the fact is that we get more with her, Kirsten, younger Kirsten, like, in year 1 with Jeevan, and they're staying in a cabin. And by that point, like, Frank isn't with them. And so a conversation later on makes me think, like, Frank died back in that apartment. Something went super sideways because Jeevan's yelling, because, like, she's so obsessed with the book. It's the only thing that she's reading. But it's like, oh, like, I always keep forgetting the line. It's such a good line, but I always keep forgetting it about, like, we're the monsters, they're the monsters, but we're also the monsters. He's like, what does that even mean? It's like, right, to those wolves, you're the monsters because you basically you murdered them. He's like, murdered? He's like, don't use that word when you're talking about me killing these animals for our survival. But it's like, you know, from their perspective, it's straight up, no, you murdered our people. So, like, just as you're scared of them, they're just as scared as you. It's kind of like the whole narrative that she was creating. But he kind of hid the book from her because it's all she kept reading, but it was also a reminder for him. And he kind of yells at her at one point in time because it's like, right, it's like, you're the one that, because she was like, you're the one that decided we should leave Frank's. And he was like, yes, but we stayed too long doing your fucking play. So I guess, like, because rather than, like, there was probably an early inkling, either Frank had it or Jeevan had it, like, we should probably leave. But they spent so much time, like, prepping and doing her play that when it, like, they stayed there a little too long, and whatever happened led to Frank dying. And so he associates it with that book, and he's like, right, don't worry, your book is still in the Ziploc. Don't even worry about it. Because we do find, like, she does track down her book. And it is still in the Ziploc, is behind all those golf balls. So it's like, right, did he find and read that copy? Because we know he was here, David was. Or could it be that Miranda's still alive? Because we know she worked on one. There was even this scene I thought was kind of interesting where we had her, like, Kirsten older reading it, and then her younger reading it, and then Miranda working on it. You know, so I think that's so fascinating. I am, like I said, I'm curious, like, cause we still don't know what actually happened to Miranda. Like, the last time we saw her was the end of last episode. But then on top of that, could it be that she worked on other ones to replace it? It seemed like a one-of-a-kind, especially considering, like, what that book symbolized, giving... Well, because didn't she say she had other copies? It's like, yeah, Kirsten got the one from... I'm blanking on the names now a little bit. It was Albert, right? The actor that died in the first episode, like, that Miranda gave the book to. Like, yeah, like, she did reference, like, oh, like, here, I have another copy I could give to your son or something like that. So it's like, she had more than one copy, but it's like, so there might be others out there, and David might have gotten his hands on one for whatever reason. Maybe someone Miranda knew that she gave a copy to, or was it just, like, enough to give to Albert and his son? I don't know. I'm still curious to see how that kind of circles back around, and, like, why that's coming up now of all times. Like, has this been slowly building up over the court in the background over these past couple years? Or is it just kind of all at once? I feel like this doesn't seem like it happens all at once. It definitely seems like a cult. I think it takes a little while. Like, it starts all small, but then it slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger. When it was actually time for the play, though, like, before they actually go on stage and stuff and do their thing, you do hear this line from Alex where she finally opens up about, like, right, what he actually said to her. And it's like, he told me, well, I told him, like, I wanted to leave the symphony or whatever. And that night, he was supposed to meet up with her at the bonfire and leave. And obviously, like, she hasn't told anyone what she did stabbing David. But it's like, oh, it's a good thing. And it's like, Alex tries to say, like, right, it wasn't about him, you know. It was about the fact is I wanted to be the lead. Like, once again, they've been stuck in their cycle for so long that Kirsten, like, got to always be the lead. To be fair, she was there when you were born. So this is kind of like, once again, it's just like, it's the further point of, like, right, they don't change enough. Like, they don't take enough risks. They don't, like, aren't spontaneous. It's like, once again, we know exactly where we're always going to be at certain times a year. We know we're going to be here, 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 and here. And this is part of our wheel that we're on. And then also, like, we know what roles everyone is going to play. She's just like, I want to be able to kind of be at the front, like, one time. I want us to do something different. Don't be so caught up in staying so similar to the cycle. And they do the play, and it kind of works out in the end. And Alex is so excited. But once again, I think it deals with, like, you know, still back to that point of, like, Kirsten is like, right, like everyone else pre-pan, she has the trauma of remembering what she lost. And so that's why she holds on to people so much and so unwilling to let things and people go, because she's been down that route before. And that's why, like, when people want to leave, it's like, oh, it's not you just leaving the symphony, it's like you're leaving me. And if you're not around me, how do I know you're going to be okay? Like, if you're here, I can make sure I can protect you, because I don't want to lose anything or anyone else again. So those are the struggles, especially when it comes to Alex. It's like, I helped raise you, I was there when you were born. And it's also because she was talking, like, Alex was talking crap about the troop. It's like, this troop raised you with your family. For you to say all that, it's kind of the jacked up thing of it all. But it's like, yeah, like I try to protect you, like I've said before, time and time again. And like I love that they intercut that with like Jeevan having the same argument with her, like 19-ish years ago. Just like, yeah, it's funny how that all comes back around, because Jeevan was like, right, like all I was supposed to do was to walk you home, and just like here we are, like he's struggling to figure things out, and it's like, I mean, where would you have been if you weren't with Kirsten? Like, I think at the end, it's just like, just as much as she needs you, you need her. Because who knows how things would have worked out, but maybe his argument is like, probably like, right, if it wasn't for you. I mean, once again, he was just angry and just scared with everything that's just going down. Once again, he's a pre-pan himself, obviously. It's like he lived a full life, with which I'm sure still had its issues of like, yeah, you lived a life, but was it to its fullest, and the world being in the state that it was? Because this wasn't just like, this is 20 years down the road where we are currently, but it's like, no, this is him like year one into this. Like, of course it's going to take your toll on you when you're like looking after some kid that's not even your own. After losing what you've lost, like, we can only assume, because last time we saw his sister, she was sick, so she might be gone. It's implied that Frank is gone, so all of that, and you're just trying to survive and figure things out. Just like, you're angry, you're sad. I think it all finally takes its own toll on you, and just like, Kirsten's fun, like, I think it's come full circle. I don't know whether she recognizes or not. Like, oh, this must be what Jeevan must have been feeling like when he was dealing with me at the time, you know? So, but Alex ended up running away, you know, with the, because it's like, yeah, because Kirsten had made this point of like, right, you don't just like say that one day, like I interpreted that as like for her almost saying like, oh, it's not like him showing up like sparked that. Like, you've been feeling like that for a while. You don't just like one day decide, oh, I'm going to leave the troop. It's like, no, you've been thinking about it for a while. You just haven't said anything to anyone. That's what it felt like to me. Or maybe it's just kind of like, maybe she was just saying in general, like, you don't just like say like, oh, I'm leaving the symphony. Like, you know, they don't have to be mutually exclusive in that regard. But that's what that's kind of the feeling I got from the way she said that. But, it's interesting, too, because, like, Kirsten had that conversation with Gil about he should return to the troop. It's like, yeah, we do miss you. You are a really good conductor. But he does say, like, oh, he enjoys retirement and stuff like that. Because she's like, oh, and, you know, all I'm saying is, like, if you want to, you can come back. And he's like, no, this is what I want. And he does talk to Sarah later on about, like, oh, he loves what they built together. And she's like, me too. But I didn't leave. You did. You know, for whatever reason. And it's like, maybe it's just, once again, like, maybe, like, the monotony of it all finally took its toll on him, or just for whatever reason, it's like, you leaving the way you did. Like, it's not like we left together. You kind of made that decision on your own and just left. You know, I stayed, you know, with everything that we built together, which is all of this. We did this together, and you just kind of poo-pooed and just, like, went off, did your own thing. Because it's like, yeah, Katrina loves you, the people here love you, so yeah, you're doing well for yourself, essentially. I didn't even talk about it, but I should have. Like, the moment it started, I was like, is that David Cross? It sure was. I just haven't seen David Cross for a while, so I almost couldn't tell that was him for a second, but I was like, that looks like that's David Cross. It totally is. Also, I didn't talk about it, but Enrico, his character came back being like, oh, that secret, like, facility, that museum place, and it's like, yeah, we're still offering you, but Sarah's like, no, it's still a no. He's like, well, I'll meet you at the other place you're going, and she's like, it's still going to be a no. But then the children, at least 2 of them return, but they have mines around their necks, and you're like, oh, holy crap. And it's like, yeah, like a cult, like you're gonna convince some kids to do this for whatever reason, and then it cuts back to a conversation we didn't quite get. I don't think, maybe it happened. I don't remember it happening in episode 2. I think it's one of those things of like, you didn't get the full context of everything at the time. But Kirsten was like, he was with the knife to David's neck. He was like, oh, first you're gonna lose Alex, then maybe that conductor of yours. Because I think out of anyone amongst the troop, they're the 2 most important people to her. Because I think Alex kind of serves as that little sister she never really had, and Sarah's kind of that friend that she was the first member of the traveling symphony that she met and latched onto, especially after losing what she lost. But on top of that being Jeevan and Frank. But on top of all of that, the kids like running, and obviously you have Sarah at the same time doing her thing on the piano, and Gil's trying to convince the little girl to take it off, but then like the little boy runs over to her, and they both hug him at the same time, saying, "There's no before," and the explosion, you know. And the next time we see Kirsten, she's outside, and she's kind of like her voice is going, like I guess like because of everything, and she's just kind of like, guys, or like she's calling out to the troop, but I think she was relatively close enough to the explosion because her face is cut up. It's interesting too because like in more ways than one, the show is actually, you know, messing with time a little bit. It's like not telling the story in a very linear way. It's like bouncing all over the place, because the scene when she picked up the book, because that's what I was like, oh, like, because at first I was kind of confused. I was like, okay, she has the book like at the end of episode 1 as an older Kirsten, so that's why I was wondering, could it be that, I was like, oh, was that scene actually like from 3 years ago before she left it at Gil's? It's like, no, it's present day. It's just we skipped to that, so it's like, oh, because that was like part way through this episode, and it's like, oh, like she had, like, we saw that scene at the end of episode 1, so that, you know, that scene we got at the end is probably like further down the line, like maybe it won't be at like the top of the next episode, but maybe it'll be in the middle of the next episode, you know, so it's gonna be interesting how they handle that. Like, once again, it makes sense considering they are bouncing between time, like in other aspects of it as well, but I just wasn't expecting that to be the case, because when she was like, oh, I don't have the book, I was like, didn't you have the book? And it's like, right, that's why, because that scene was like after you retrieved the book after having left it at Gil's. But because she does like hear like wolves howling and stuff, like when she's a little girl in year 1 again, and then she goes and tries to she looks for Jeevan and can't find him, and like the book's just laying out, and so it's like something happened to him. So I guess this is around the time she lost him, because by year 2, at some point during year 2, that's when she met Sarah, she had already lost Jeevan. So what happened to him? Is there some correlation with what's going on now, or is it just kind of the realities of, oh, it's a dangerous world, especially then, because those are super early days, so we'll just ultimately have to wait and see. These are back-to-back episodes, which I should also note, man, it's so weird that, like, I wasn't expecting that to be like I thought, like, because, like, with Doom, because I haven't watched a lot on HBO Max, so the only thing I've watched are, like, Doom Patrol and Titans, but they did, like, 3 episodes at the beginning, and then week to week afterwards. Like, you know, we've seen a little bit with Hulu in certain regards, and also Prime Video's kind of done that a little bit, but I wasn't expecting, like, no, 2 episodes a week. I was like, oh, that's weird. It's almost doing a little bit of a 12 Monkeys thing, if you're unaware. Like, its final season was aired over the course, well, season 3 and season 4 aired weirdly, whereas like season 3 was over the course of a weekend, season 4 was over the course of 4 weekends, but it was like 3 episodes a week, except for the final week where it was like 2 episodes. It's kind of like that. So like this is going to be 2 episodes every week, except for the final episode's going to be on its own. Maybe it's just longer, so maybe that's why they also decided to do like that, but like I wasn't, because I saw last week, I was like, oh, it seemed like episode 4 and 5 are going to be dropped on the same day. So I was like, are they doing 3 episodes? It was like, no, it's 2, which is like, no complaint. It's just like, oh, I thought that was interesting. Maybe they felt with the nature of the story, it fit better to have like the episodes done like that. I don't know. Maybe they felt like after it being week to week would be a little weird with what this story is. Maybe that's why they felt that way. I don't know. Maybe it's just them scheduling stuff out. They decided, whatever reason, I just thought it was interesting. Don't really see too many things do that. I mean, I guess like Bugassel is doing that weirdly enough on like Netflix or something. Tangents and all that aside, I just thought it was interesting. I'm excited. You see, I still haven't watched episode 5 yet, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everything takes us going into episode 5. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.